The casket gleamed under fluorescent lights, polished mahogany against white lilies. Sandra's face was peaceful, waxy, a stranger's version of my wife. That's when I felt it. Michael's hand on my shoulder, fingers digging in just slightly too hard. My son leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. Words meant only for me. "Now the old man is alone," he whispered, and then he laughed. A soft, calculated sound that traveled no further than the space between us. His eyes, cold as river stones, met mine without flinching. I stood frozen, grief momentarily eclipsed by confusion that would soon become understanding. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. I suppose you need to understand what brought us to that moment. Sandra and I had been married for 37 years. We met in college. She was studying literature. I was in engineering. Everyone said we were opposites, but that's what made it work. She brought poetry into my world of straight lines and calculations. I taught her how to appreciate the beauty in precision. We bought our first house when Michael was 3, a fixer-upper in a decent neighborhood. I spent weekends repairing leaky faucets and replacing drywall, while Sandra planted gardens that transformed our yard into something from a magazine. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I worked my way up at Wilson Construction until I was running major projects. Sandra taught high school English and wrote short stories that occasionally got published in literary journals. Michael was our only child. Sandra had complications during his birth. Nothing that threatened her life, but enough that doctors advised against having more children. We poured everything into him: love, attention, resources. Private school when the local options weren't challenging enough. Tennis lessons when he showed athletic promise. College without student loans. A down payment on his first condo. "You're spoiling him," my brother Tom warned once. We were watching Michael open Christmas presents. He was 16, sullen despite the expensive gifts piled around him. "We're providing opportunities," Sandra corrected. "Michael deserves the best." That became our mantra. Michael deserves the best. When he changed majors 3 times in college, costing us an extra year's tuition. When he quit his first job after 6 months because his boss didn't appreciate his talents. When he moved back home at 28 after his startup failed, bringing with him expensive habits and an entitled attitude. Sandra always defended him. "He's finding himself," she'd say. "He's sensitive, creative. The world doesn't understand people like Michael." I began to wonder if I understood him either. The first major fracture in our relationship came when Michael turned 30. He'd been living with us for 2 years, supposedly working on a new business plan while burning through our retirement savings. I suggested, gently I thought, that perhaps it was time for him to find his own place. "You're kicking me out?" he asked, his voice rising to that pitch Sandra couldn't resist. "Mom, are you hearing this?" "Robert," Sandra said, using my full name the way she did when she was disappointed. "Michael needs our support." "He needs independence," I countered. "He needs to stand on his own." "I need parents who believe in me," Michael shot back. The argument escalated. Words were said. Doors were slammed. In the end, Michael stayed, and something between us changed. He began treating me with a cold politeness that was somehow worse than outright hostility. He and Sandra formed a united front. Late-night conversations would stop when I entered a room. Inside jokes excluded me. Small daily rejections that accumulated like grains of sand, eventually weighing more than I could carry. I tried talking to Sandra about it, but she accused me of jealousy. "He's our son," she said. "Of course we're close." "It feels like you're choosing him over me," I admitted. "Don't be ridiculous," she replied, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Then came Sandra's diagnosis. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less, the doctors said. The news hit like a physical blow. Sandra and I had planned to grow old together. We'd talked about retiring, traveling, watching Michael finally settle down and start a family. Now our future had been reduced to a handful of months. Something strange happened, though. Sandra's illness seemed to energize Michael. He took charge of her care, researching treatments, interviewing specialists, organizing her medications. He became the perfect son, attentive, compassionate, devoted. I was grateful, truly. It gave me space to process my own grief while knowing Sandra was being cared for. But there were moments that didn't fit, like catching Michael going through our financial documents late one night. "Just making sure everything's in order," he explained. "Mom's worried about you handling things alone." Or the time I overheard him on the phone, voice low, "Just wait until afterward. Everything will be easier then." I dismissed my suspicions as paranoia born of grief and exhaustion. Michael was helping. That's what mattered. Sandra declined rapidly. The last week she barely recognized me, though she always knew when Michael was in the room. Her final words weren't to me, her husband of nearly 4 decades. They were to our son. Take care of everything. And then she was gone. Which brings us back to the funeral. To that moment, when Michael leaned in and whispered those words that should have shocked me, but somehow didn't. Now the old man is alone. The laugh that followed was soft, but unmistakable, a sound of triumph. I maintained my composure through the service, accepted condolences from friends and colleagues, watched Michael play the role of grieving son to perfection. His eyes remained dry, but his voice caught at all the right moments. People squeezed his arm, told him how strong he was being for his poor father. It wasn't until we returned home that the mask slipped again. The last mourners had left, leaving behind casseroles and sympathy cards. Michael poured himself a generous scotch, my scotch, the expensive bottle I'd been saving for special occasions. "So," he said, settling into what had always been Sandra's chair, "we should talk about the house." "The house," I repeated, still wearing my funeral suit, tie loosened, but still around my neck. "It's too big for just you," he said, swirling the amber liquid. "You should sell it. I know a great realtor." "This is my home," I said. "Our home. Your mother and I built a life here." Michael smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom's gone, Dad. And let's be honest, you're not getting any younger. Wouldn't you be happier in something smaller? A retirement community, maybe?" "I'm 65, not 90, I said, "and I'm not selling my house." "Our house," he corrected. "Mom left her half to me." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" Michael reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document. "Mom updated her will last month. Didn't she tell you? Half the house, half of the savings, her life insurance. It all comes to me." His smile widened. "She wanted to make sure I was taken care of." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. "Let me see that." He handed over the document. It was legitimate. Sandra's signature, witnesses, notary stamp. A complete revision of the will we'd created together years ago, which had left everything to me, with Michael as the secondary beneficiary. "When did she do this?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "When she realized you might not have her best interests at heart," Michael said. "Mom was worried about you making rash decisions after she was gone." "Rash decisions?" I repeated. "Like cutting me off," Michael said, dropping any pretense of sympathy. "She knew you resented supporting me. She wanted to make sure you couldn't just throw me out once she wasn't here to stop you." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Michael's sudden devotion during Sandra's illness, the whispered phone calls, the documents. He'd manipulated her when she was at her most vulnerable, scared and in pain, worried about the future. "You took advantage of your dying mother," I said quietly. Michael's expression hardened. I protected myself. "Mom understood that you've never really supported my vision. She wanted to make sure I had the resources to succeed." "By taking what we built together?" I asked. "This house represents 40 years of mortgage payments. Our savings are for retirement." "Well," Michael said, draining his glass, "I guess you'll have to adjust your plans." In that moment, looking at my son's calculating eyes over the rim of a crystal tumbler, I understood what that laugh at the funeral had meant. This wasn't grief. This was victory. Sandra's death wasn't a tragedy for Michael. It was an opportunity. With her gone, he could finally claim what he believed was rightfully his. And I was just an obstacle, an old man who could be pushed aside. "I think you should leave," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Dad," Michael said, his tone patronizing, "this is as much my house as yours now. Mom made sure of that." "Not tonight," I said. "Tonight I need to be alone." Something in my expression must have warned him not to push further. He shrugged, set down his glass, and stood. "Fine. We can discuss the details tomorrow. I'm thinking we should list the house by the end of the month. The market's hot right now." After he left, I sat in the quiet house, surrounded by memories and the lingering scent of funeral flowers. Grief and betrayal fought for dominance in my chest. I picked up a framed photo of Sandra, taken on our 30th anniversary trip to Maine. Her smile was radiant, eyes crinkled at the corners the way I loved. "Did you know what he was doing?" I asked her image. "Did you understand what you were signing?" The photo offered no answers, just Sandra's frozen smile, captured in happier times. I spent that night going through our files. Sandra had always handled our finances, not because I couldn't, but because she enjoyed the organization of it. I found statements, insurance policies, property deeds. And there, in a folder marked Updated Estate Planning, was a copy of the new will Michael had shown me, along with other documents I hadn't seen before. Power of attorney forms, signed during her final weeks, changes to our joint accounts, even a quitclaim deed transferring her interest in our vacation cabin directly to Michael, bypassing probate entirely. It was a methodical dismantling of our shared life, piece by piece, all legal, all signed by Sandra's increasingly shaky hand as cancer consumed her. The next morning, I called James Patterson, our family attorney for 20 years. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," he said after I explained the situation. "I told Sandra this wasn't the right approach, but she was determined." "She wasn't thinking clearly," I argued. "The medications, the pain—" "I know," James interrupted gently, "but she was legally competent. I tested that thoroughly before allowing her to sign anything." "Can I contest it?" I asked. "You can," he said, "but it would be expensive, time-consuming, and—" He paused. "Robert, she left video testimony explaining her decisions. She specifically addresses the possibility that you might challenge the will." My heart sank. "I see. I'm sorry," James said. "For what it's worth, I think she believed she was doing what was best for both of you." Indeed, after hanging up, I sat at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared thousands of meals, helped Michael with homework, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. The house felt cavernous around me, each room haunted by memories that now seemed suspect. Had Sandra been planning this for months, years? Had our entire marriage been building to this final betrayal? No, I refused to believe that. Something had happened during those final months, some influence that had twisted Sandra's thinking when she was at her most vulnerable. I remembered something from early in her illness. We were sitting in the oncologist's office, waiting for test results. Sandra had squeezed my hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll take care of Michael when I'm gone." "Of course," I'd replied. "He's our son." She'd shaken her head. "No, I mean really take care of him. He needs more support than you realize." At the time, I'd attributed her concern to maternal instinct in the face of mortality. Now I wondered if it had been the beginning of Michael's manipulation, planting the seed that he needed special protection from me. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Michael stood on the porch, dressed casually, as if this were any normal day. "Morning, Dad," he said, stepping past me without waiting for an invitation. "I've been thinking about the house situation. I found some great condos near downtown that might—" "I'm not selling," I interrupted. Michael sighed dramatically. "Dad, be reasonable. This place is too big for you. The maintenance alone—" "I built this house," I said quietly. "Every repair, every improvement, my hands are in these walls. I'm not leaving." "Well, that's going to be a problem," Michael said, dropping the concerned son act. Because I need my half of the equity. I've got plans that require capital. What plans? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm starting a new venture, he said, eyes lighting with the familiar enthusiasm that had preceded each of his failed business attempts. It's revolutionary, a platform for connecting artisanal food producers directly with high-end restaurants. I've got investors lined up, but I need to show significant personal investment. And my retirement savings is your personal investment? I asked. Michael had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, but recovered quickly. Mom wanted me to succeed. She believed in me. Your mother was dying and terrified about what would happen to both of us, I said. You took advantage of that. That's not fair, Michael protested, but his eyes slid away from mine. Isn't it? I stepped closer. Tell me something. That day at the funeral, when you laughed and said I was alone now, what did you mean by that? A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by a practiced look of confusion. Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. I was grieving. We all were. You weren't grieving, I said. You were celebrating. Your mother's death meant you finally had access to what you've always wanted, our money. And that's a horrible thing to say, Michael replied. But there was no real outrage in his voice, just calculation, measuring how much to deny. I won't contest the will, I said, making a decision. What your mother left you is yours, but I won't sell this house. Not now, not ever. Then buy me out, Michael countered. My half is worth at least $300,000 in this market. I don't have that kind of liquid cash, I said. The money's tied up in retirement accounts. Then we have a problem, Michael said, his expression hardening, because I need that money and I'm entitled to it. Entitled, I repeated softly. That's always been your problem, hasn't it? You think the world owes you something just for existing. The world doesn't, Michael shot back. But you and Mom do. Who gave up her writing career to raise me? Who worked overtime for 20 years to pay for my education? You owe me. The words hung in the air between us, revealing a truth I'd never wanted to face. My son saw his parents as nothing more than resources to be drained, obligations to be fulfilled. Get out of my house, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Our house, Michael corrected with a smirk. And I think I'll stay. In fact, I might just move back in. It would be more convenient while we sort out the sale. Your mother might have left you half this house on paper, I said, but I'm still living here. And I don't want you under my roof. You can't stop me, Michael said. Legally? I'm not talking about legal, I interrupted. I'm talking about what's right, about respect, about decency, things your mother and I apparently failed to teach you. Something flickered in Michael's eyes. Not shame exactly, but awareness that he'd miscalculated. He'd expected me to crumble, to retreat into grief and confusion. He hadn't anticipated resistance. Fine, he said finally. I'll give you some time. But this isn't over, Dad. That money is mine, and I'm going to get it one way or another. After he left, I sat in Sandra's garden, watching bees move between the flowers she'd planted. 37 years of marriage, and I'd never really known her thoughts those final months. Had she truly believed Michael needed protection from me? Or had she simply been too weak, too confused by medication and pain to resist his influence? I would never know. That certainty was gone, along with so much else. What remained was a choice. I could fight, contest the will, challenge the changes, drag our family's pain through the courts. Or I could accept what couldn't be changed and focus on what could. The next morning, I called my company and arranged for early retirement. Then I contacted a real estate agent, not to sell my house, but to list the vacation cabin Michael now owned. I knew the market there. He'd get a good price, enough to fund whatever venture he was dreaming of now. The agent was confused. If your son owns the property, shouldn't he be the one contacting me? He doesn't know the details like I do, I explained. I'm just getting things started for him. It was the last gift I would give my son, not out of obligation, but as a final lesson. Here's what your mother and I built. Here's what we sacrificed. Here's what you're so eager to dismantle for your own gain. 3 weeks later, Michael called, his voice animated with unusual gratitude. "Dad, I just got an offer on the cabin. It's more than I expected." "That's good," I said. "Your mother would be happy to know it's helping you." A pause. "About the house. I've been thinking, maybe we don't need to sell right away. You could stay, and we could work out some kind of arrangement for my half." It was as close to a peace offering as Michael was capable of making. Not because he'd had a change of heart, but because he'd gotten what he wanted for now. The cabin sale would fund his latest scheme, and the house could wait. "I'd appreciate that," I said, choosing my battles carefully. After we hung up, I walked through the house, touching doorframes Sandra had painted, sitting in chairs where we'd read together on quiet evenings. The grief was still there, raw and persistent, but alongside it was something new, a determination to reclaim what remained of my life. Sandra was gone. Our marriage, with all its complexities and secrets, was part of the past. What remained was this house, these memories, and a son who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to inheritance. I opened Sandra's desk drawer and found her journal, the one she'd kept faithfully for decades. I'd never read it, respecting her privacy, even in marriage. Now I turned to the final entries, written in a shaky hand during her last weeks. "I worry about them both," she'd written. "Robert, alone with his grief. Michael, alone with his ambitions. I've tried to protect them from each other, but I fear I've only made things worse." I closed the journal, understanding at last. Sandra hadn't betrayed me. She'd been trying in her own misguided way to keep peace between the two men she loved. She hadn't seen that in protecting Michael from consequences. She'd prevented him from growing into the man he could have been. That night, I called Michael again. "I've been thinking about what your mother would want," I said. "And I don't think it's this, us fighting over her legacy." "I'm not fighting," Michael said defensively. "I'm just claiming what's legally mine." "I know," I replied, "and you'll get it. But not all at once, and not at the expense of destroying what your mother and I built together." "What are you suggesting?" His voice was cautious. "The house stays as it is for now. I live here, maintain it, pay the taxes. When the time comes, whether that's when I choose to downsize or when I pass away, you'll get your half. In the meantime, I'll help you with your business venture, not with a blank check, but with what every business actually needs: structure, accountability, realistic goals." Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing immediate gratification against longer-term benefit. "You want to be involved in my business?" he finally asked. "I want to be involved in your life," I corrected. "I'm still your father, Michael, despite everything." Another long pause. "I'll think about it," he said finally. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was simply a door left slightly open, a possibility that whatever Michael and I became to each other going forward might be built on something more substantial than inheritance. As I sat on the porch that evening watching the sunset Sandra would never see, I thought about that moment at the funeral. "Now, the old man is alone," Michael had said, and laughed. He'd been wrong. I wasn't alone. I had memories, purpose, and the hard-won wisdom of understanding exactly who my son was. Sometimes the greatest act of love is seeing someone clearly, without illusion or denial. Sandra had never managed that with Michael. I was finally learning how. The last laugh wouldn't be his. It would belong to life itself, which has a way of teaching lessons to those willing to learn them. I was still learning, even at 65. Perhaps Michael would too, in time. That would be Sandra's true legacy, not money or property, but growth, understanding, maybe even, eventually, forgiveness. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, just click on the box on the screen. Thank you so much for listening.